I remember my dad coming home one day and saying, we've got this requirement now. I want everybody to go through the home and pull all the clothing, all of the garments that you have, everything that has the color red. And my mom had this is why it was really hard for me. I had just gotten a dress made. My mom had made me this dress with little red hearts all over it. And it was very well sewn. My mom I put her to the standard, a really good seamstress. And she did. I just loved this dress. And I think I got to wear it like maybe twice. And we had to throw it in a big garbage bag. All the things, toys, and my dad's ties, and hair things, and I mean, everything that even just had that color red in it, it was disposed of. I don't even know what they did with it. I don't even know.
Wow. That's so hard as a little girl.
So
my
sad.
word.
I remember crying at my mom, and I just seeing that look on her face like, well, this is what we're asked to do.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I grew up in the FLDS community. It is a polygamous group run by Warren Jeffs, and I moved out when I was 18 years old.
I was raised LDS, and I've been married for 9 years now and have 2 awesome kids.
Yes, we do. And just so you know, we do have a podcast available if you'd rather just listen in today. And please don't forget to like and subscribe.
We are so excited and so honored today to have a special guest. We have Elise with us. Hi, Elise.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
We were so excited that you reached out. I know that we had talked before about the fact that we really want to wait till people are fully ready to share their stories. You know, we try to never push anybody into a vulnerable position because it takes so much courage and so much strength to share your story. And so we're just grateful that you reached out and that you're willing to trust us with helping you share your story.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we want to start from the beginning of your story. I'm very happy and intrigued to hear your side of things because you were raised in the same community or in the FLDS church as I was. But obviously everyone has such a unique perspective even within the same church. So I'm very excited to hear what your experience was like.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in the FLDS, and my parents lived in the Salt Lake Valley, so in Sandy. And so I'm the second oldest. I have one older brother. So that falls into the chronological aspects of where I'm at. I'm one of 19 kids.
From the same mother?
No.
Okay.
I had 2 moms.
Okay.
My mom had 13.
Wow.
And yeah, so when I was born in Hilldale. So the Twin Cities, Colorado City, Hilldale. I was born at the maternity home.
I wonder if the same maternity home, the one that was called Hilldale? Is that the one?
Like the one that Aunt Lydia Lydia delivered me.
So you and I were born in the same place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. So
I actually had a couple of mine there too.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Well, we can't wait to get into that, but part of your story as well. Were your parents also raised in the FLDS church?
Yes. So my dad grew up without his father after he was 8 years old. So his dad passed away. And then his mom was one of, I think, 4 moms in his family. And his side of the family, so his mom had 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. And he's the baby boy. And he basically was raised in the New Mexico, Albuquerque area. He spent a lot of his life there. So those who understand the time of the raid that's always talked about in the 1953 raid, my grandma, so my dad's mom, at that time relocated down there. And she went into hiding. And so basically the majority of my dad's upbringing was down there in Albuquerque. So he spent a lot of years down there where she kind of just raised her kids.
Wow. Were there other women that also relocated there as well? Or was it just her? Or was there a small community there?
I don't believe so. I don't remember hearing any stories of any other women or men that were there.
Okay.
For whatever reason, I don't even really know why she was placed there or why she was, I don't even know if she chose to be there. I actually don't even know that side of it, that story. But my mom was born and raised here in Colorado City.
Okay.
So my dad had a lot to do with the community because his oldest sister, married my mom's dad
Oh, wow.
when she was very young. I know this is going to be like my own I am my own grandpa's kind of
Hey,
story.
you've heard that song. Yay.
Sam had to introduce me to that
Yes.
song after we were married. He's like, haven't you ever heard that song? And I was like, no. And then now when we talk about family trees in the FLDS, sometimes he's like, well.
It's a real thing.
Well, it's you can do it through marriage, but blood related, I think that's a little too far.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
My aunt married my mom's dad. She was a plural wife, and I spent most of my upbringing around her. Like, she helped raise part of my family, especially my younger years. She was here in Colorado City. She had a home. And so my mom and my dad were arranged through the church, the religion, and were placed together. My mom was 17 and my dad was 21.
Oh,
okay.
So still fairly close, just two young people.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so.
And your mom was the first wife. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So your dad, you say, grew up in New Mexico area. Your mom grew up in Short Creek area,
Yes.
Colorado City, Hilldale, same place. And so how did they come? They were arranged like most marriages are in the FLDS. I guess I should say all of them. So what happened there? Did she go to Mexico? Did they bring him to Short Creek? How did that work?
He came to the priesthood meetings that they had. So the prophet at the time was Uncle Roy.
Oh, yes.
And he was in direct connection with him and communicated with him. Like, he was encouraged to be in open connection with him. Of course, my dad's dad was one of the founding people of this community too. And so he was gone a lot, though. He was a traveling insurance salesman.
Oh, wow.
Kind of he did a lot of that. And so he was gone a lot. And so my grandma, raising her kids, very rarely got to even see him, talk to him. Back in the 50s, that was quite an ordeal to have even a phone call,
Wow.
Especially in the rural area here in Colorado City,
Mm-hmm.
But her being in New Mexico, it was a lot easier. But he was in hiding. She was in hiding. So a lot of the communication was very, very minute. It was almost non-existent.
Wow. So this
was a lot of letters.
Yeah. And you say they were in hiding. Can you explain why they were in hiding at that time?
So the community here in Colorado City and Hilldale were, I don't know what the word is. They were raided.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the one in Texas, where they were founded living polygamy and the community was taken apart. They were separated and segregated and physically shipped, the women and the children, into all areas of the state and far off. And a lot of men were imprisoned, and some of the women were, after so much time, they were able to slowly, one by one, come back. So the prophet at the time, Leroy Johnson, which we called Uncle Roy, was his mission to gather every last person back to the community.
Yeah.
And so, which they did. And some of them, like my grandma, ended up just staying put because I don't actually even know. I would like to know. I won't ever be able to ask her, or I don't know if my dad knows, but for whatever reason, she stayed.
I imagine it was everything had to be done very secretive. I heard about these stories of Uncle Roy rounding up everyone. Yeah, rounding up everyone from all the different places, different states, throughout the states. But it was all done very secretive because at that time, practicing polygamy was a felony. And so it wasn't that was the whole reason that it was raided to begin with. Is that right?
Yeah. I can only imagine on some level a degree of what kind of pressure they were put under, and having little babies and whole gads of them, like just how to take care of them and the stress that you're put under somewhere unfamiliar, and culture and people, and not being able to live the way that you want to live. And I have a lot of empathy for all of those people that went through all of that. That's
right.
Heavy, heavy. So my mom and dad were, through the prophet at the time, were told, you're going here, you're going here. And so they got to have a little bit of they knew of each other, obviously, because my dad's sister was involved in that community, or in that family, I should say. Mm-hmm. And so my mom knew of him, not intimately or like really had much to do with him, just knew he existed, knew who he was. Mm-hmm. And so when they got together, when they were told to, it was quite typical for them to go get a legal marriage done, which they were instructed to go do before they had the spiritual ceremony through the church. And so that's what they did. He came and picked her up and went and got the license done. And then they had their ceremony through the church.
Interesting. Was that ceremony something that, because back in those days it was done a lot differently than it was during Warren's time before he was...
Oh, yeah.
What was the ceremony, and were people invited? How much do you know about that?
Oh, yeah.
Was it a big family event?
I actually have the pictures. My mom was going to throw them away at one point, fast forward. But I'm saying, like, I got to have those pictures. I have all of them, and I'm so happy that I kept them. Yay. And I was a little rebellious and not going to throw all that crap away.
Oh, good for you.
Like we were told to.
I wish we had more pictures of Sam. We have like 5 pictures of his entire childhood.
My heart.
And we have no idea. There might be more. We don't know. And we'll probably never have access to them. If they do have them, we won't have access to them. Or there's a big possibility, because his mother is very faithful, that she probably did throw them out. And that's heartbreaking too.
Yes, I've heard rumors that some members of the family have some of these pictures still. And I don't know.
So.
I don't know if we'll ever see them or if we'll get our hands on them. But yeah, it's hard to get any pictures. So I'm glad that all of the ones you have today weren't thrown away or burned as so many of the other pictures were, which when we get to that part of your story, you can explain a little bit more on why people would do that. But
absolutely. So the ceremony part for their wedding, it was very, it was a happy time. It was very involved. A lot of the family, my mom's side of the family, a lot of brothers and sisters, and, moms and their kids and everybody. They had a big reception, and I have those photos of them when they got to have their after celebration. And I'm really happy that I got to keep them, and I keep them in a safe place because,
Good. That's so special to have those still, and to have those memories, and know that things at one time were very joyful and happy within the FLDS community. The
things we take for granted.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Were you born before your father married his second wife?
Yes. I was born in 82.
Okay.
And so my second mom was married in 89, 88 or 89. I can't remember.
Okay. So a while after.
Yeah. I was actually around within a year's time of me going to first grade. I went to first grade in 89, and she was already established in our family, but not for very long. I can't remember exactly. I'm going to roll with 89 that she was married.
Works for me.
Anyway, yeah. So she basically was in my life for a considerable amount of my upbringing. Anyway, she helped raise me.
Was that something you were excited for, to have another mother come into the family? Or since you were kind of old enough to remember it, how did that make you feel, having another mother? And
I was super excited. My mom, I've had a little conversation with her over my life, and just kind of curious. It was kind of one of those things where in the culture, some of those questions were just kind of very unsure if you could ask or if it was something that would be shared, or, you know, if that's just something that you just don't ask. I don't know. There was a lot of questions within me that should I ask? Is it something I need to know? I vividly remember the ceremony. So it actually took place in our own home, like in our front room. So the prophet at the time was Rulin Jeffs, and he and a whole bunch of people showed up and crammed everybody in that one room. And I actually have pictures of, I got to hold my second mom's hand while she was marrying my dad.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Interesting.
So I was just thrilled with having her. Like, she was a new person. She was beautiful. I loved her. I loved people anyway. I was a people person. At that time, I just remember just feeling like I'm grateful that I got a good experience, because some people didn't.
Right.
It was, you know, the secrecy. Like, I got to experience the openness, or at least a little bit more casual setting, rather than this big, you know, secrecy and do it quick and don't talk about it and nobody's there. And
that's how most of the experiences that I knew of and was around for were. They're very secretive. All of a sudden, the new person was getting married, and you didn't really know until they were already married. And so it's very good, and it's a good reminder for a lot of people too that the FLDS was not always the way that it was when Warren took over. It was very much more open. You know, even like you mentioned, your dad was raised in New Mexico. You know, so the community was more spread out and intertwined with the outside world, and then before it became so secretive and big walls and all that.
Yeah, for sure. My dad had a lot of Gentile experience, like perspective. He lived it. He went to school, public school, and like I have all of his memorabilia, like his report cards and his school pictures, and I have a lot of his portfolio of his life. I was actually going to put together a life history book for him, or at least for the family, something that was established. I don't know if very many people know this. I came in contact with my dad's stuff at one time because he needed somewhere safe for his personal belongings to go, because he was sent away on a repentance mission. Anyway, we'll get to that. But
yes.
I have his dad's. So his dad was Thurl Dockstader, and he is the dad of all the Dockstaters here in this community.
Wow.
So he's kind of the founding father of all of that genealogy history.
Do you know, was he a convert to the FLDS, or?
I believe so. I think he came from Idaho.
Okay. So maybe he was he was a part of the mainstream LDS church and then converted to the FLDS, possibly, or maybe he just maybe he was one of the founding FLDS leaders. It's hard to keep everyone straight, but
thinking about it, that actually rings some bells about that side of history for him, of where he came from. I think he was part of the LDS and then converted. Sad that I don't just have confidence in knowing that I can say yes or no. I don't know.
No problem.
No, that's fine. I bet your grandpas were both friends.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I have his personal traveling pocket expenditure book. So a little tiny pocketbook that he would keep in his front pocket, where back then, when they would travel, they would write down their expenditures, kind of like a little checkbook of the things that they spent things on, in his own handwriting, and it's all tattered and everything. It's kind of cool.
Wow, that is cool to have those type of, that type of memorabilia is, I feel like, so
his handwriting is
rare.
Just gorgeous. I'm like, I always get thrilled by seeing that kind of history and that type of memorabilia and stuff that, just kind of feels a little bit, one more piece to tie yourself to that person that I never knew,
Right. And so interesting to have that kind of document where, you see kind of what he was up to, right? A little bit.
Yeah. You can see what he spent it on and how much it costs. Like, it just gives you a little insight into his world of what it looked like then. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I like that a lot.
So after your parents were married and you had the second wife, were you still in Short Creek for most of your upbringing?
So we were still in Salt Lake. So I was born in the community in Short Creek, Hilldale.
Okay.
And my mom just came down long enough to have me because that's where the midwife was.
Oh.
So Aunt Lydia here with Uncle Fred's family, that's where all the babies were born. And that's where she was born. That's where the whole community was born.
Yeah.
And so she felt familiar with that. And that's where she had a lot of her kids. Actually, I think back up. She had some of them here and some of them up north.
Interesting. I was going to say, I know that most of the community would have their babies at Hilldale, as they called it, or under the direction of Aunt Lydia.
Yeah.
And Aunt Lydia was Uncle Fred's wife, and Uncle Fred was the bishop of Short Creek. But
Yes.
I did not realize that people would come from northern Utah, Salt Lake area, down to Short Creek to have their babies. That's something I wasn't aware of.
It was quite common for them to do that, just because that was just another connection, another piece and part to the community. Mm-hmm. It was another service that was offered, and the way they handled the women when they had their babies and the way they were treated, and I'm really grateful that I got to have that experience there. Going back and forth to mainstream hospital to the clinic is like, or Hilldale, we used to call it the clinic. But anyway, I'm really glad that I got to have that experience to know like what that kind of culture and environment was like, and kind of get a little understanding of what previous women went through and what that was like, to have essentially an in-home birth anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was obviously there were a lot of children being born all the time in the FLDS. And so the trip to the clinic or the trip to Hilldale to have those babies was very common, even within one family. And so I don't know if this would be the same for you, but in my young teenager childhood mind, I looked at Aunt Lydia as this goddess that was this most amazing person on earth,
bringing all the babies into
the world. Yeah,
she was very educated. She was very respected. She understood a lot, but I felt like she was highly inspired. A very unique person. One that had that life mission. Obviously, that was what she was meant to do, and she did it graciously. She did it very respectfully. She knew how to handle very tough situations. She was just very inspired, and a lot of women entrusted her to, help them with a very important part of life. So what better way to do that?
So back to Salt Lake. So you were actually raised was it Salt Lake City or a different place up there?
No, in Sandy. I mean, Sandy. Salt Lake essentially, but we had a home in Sandy. The home was my grandma's home, my dad's mom. So she moved from Albuquerque to Sandy, had a home there. And my mom and dad moved in the upper floor, and my grandma lived in the basement.
Okay.
And so I was raised till I think the year 1990 is when we moved. 89 or 90, we moved to a new home because we had 2 moms and 4 kids and 3 bedrooms. Wow. You do the math.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that there was a huge FLDS congregation or group living in northern Utah for the longest time. So I'm glad that we're talking to someone from that location because I never experienced that. So can you tell us?
That was normal for me, yeah.
Okay. And do you know, was the Salt Lake, Sandy, Utah group, was it there before the Short Creek area, or did they go from Short Creek up to northern Utah? Do you happen to know that?
I don't know. I mean, even at the time of the raid, so back in the 50s, there were some people living in Salt Lake. They did have people located there. But over time, a lot more people they were spread out through the whole valley. I had cousins that lived across the valley, and we had a lot of childhood memories with them. And A lot of good memories, actually.
Good.
Feel pretty grateful that I can say my childhood was, I don't know. I don't know that I'd ever want anything different than the way I was raised then. It was just, even though we were living in the Gentile world, you could say, of the belief then that we had a very good life. We were raised very well. We had nice things. We had clean communities, like in our neighborhoods and stuff that we lived in. Like even back in the 80s, I don't know. I didn't ever feel unsafe where I was living. I don't ever remember having an unsafe memory in the places that we lived.
Good. Good.
That's awesome. Did you all still have the same dress code and wear the same clothing, even though you were around so many other Gentiles? Compared to being in the Short Creek community, everybody's dressing alike, right? Did you still have that?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, of course, it wasn't as strict as it got to be in the recent of the culture or the religion. But yeah, there was a lot of modesty. Absolutely. There was a lot of, I look back and go, wow, Mom, that was not as modest as it is today. Like, I remember growing up with, we didn't have full underwear. That wasn't implied to the community until I was in first grade. I just remember that's a very strong timeline of a lot of things that changed in the community. Yeah. At that time, underwear was the long underwear. So your garment that went your neck to your ankles to your wrists were kind of being tested and figured out on patterns, sizes, and all of that. And the only the worst thing about it, they only had one kind of fabric, and I hated it so bad. Oh. They had this cotton, scratchy, nasty. Yeah. I hated them. Never liked them, ever.
Wow. I agree with you. So do you happen to know before? Because my whole life, I only ever remember having to wear those garments. I never had any other options. Do you know before those garments came around, were people wearing what everyone would consider normal underwear?
So basically, I just remember what I was given to wear or, help me get dressed with when I was younger, because I was just, not even in first grade yet. So I remember just normal underwear, t-shirts and
really
under things. Yeah. So Melissa's question, what was your clothing like? I remember going to school or even after school, wearing knee highs, socks that went up to my knees and shoes. So there was parts of skin that was not necessarily showing, but it wasn't covered. Like a layer of clothing, long underwear, the garment part. We didn't wear short sleeves. We wore long sleeves. We didn't have to have collars. We wore jumpers and knit clothing and, different textures. But that slowly became cut off and changed and very restricted. And colors. I remember hearing you guys previously talk about colors, when colors became a big deal, the color red. I remember my dad coming home one day and saying, we've got this requirement now. I want everybody to go through the home and pull all the clothing, all of the garments that you have, everything that has the color red. And my mom had this is why it was really hard for me. I had just gotten a dress made. My mom had made me this dress with little red hearts all over it. And it was very well sewn. My mom I put her to the standard, a really good seamstress. And she did. I just loved this dress. And I think I got to wear it maybe twice. And we had to throw it in a big garbage bag. All the things, toys, and my dad's ties and hair things. And everything that even just had that color red in it, it was disposed of. I don't even know what they did with it. I don't even know.
Wow.
That's so hard as a little girl.
So
oh my
sad.
word.
I remember crying at my mom and I just seeing that look on her face well, this is what we're asked to do. And today I just want to say all kinds of things about it. But looking back, I just, thinking about that little girl that wanted that dress so bad, just how it was, and I couldn't do anything about it. It's just the way it's going to be. It is what it is.
That's so tough. And I imagine that there was some, what they would consider a good reason for it. Did they explain to you at that young age why you weren't allowed to have red?
I don't remember as a young girl being told, because I didn't ask why.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't ask why.
You weren't allowed.
And if we did, we got reprimanded for asking why.
Right.
It was just because I said, or just because we were asked, or we don't ask why, we don't ask questions. But later on, I learned as an adult, probably not until after I started having kids, really understanding, like, what was the reason for that? Like, I'm not asking why, challenging it. I just want to understand. I just want to understand the reason why. Find out that it was a sacred color. It was one that was being held as a high level of glory, that at the coming of Christ, he would show up in a red robe, and that was a color of respect. And we don't disrespect that while we're here. We don't take it. It's kind of like saying the name in vain, the Lord's name in vain. Of you just don't devil in it. You just leave it alone.
Right.
So
right.
I was just like, why does that doesn't even whatever. That doesn't even make sense to me. I don't agree with it. At the time, I remember just that gut feeling of like, that is the most insane thing I've heard.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to oppose it. I'm not going to challenge it. I'm not going to say that's wrong. It was just like everybody else, put it on a shelf.
We had a lot.
Put it right up there.
Yeah, we put a lot of things on our shelves, didn't we? It got to the point
until
where
you couldn't see the shelf anymore.
Exactly. It got to the point where, at least for me, I almost didn't even have a shelf anymore. I wasn't even.
It was a mount. It was a big mountain.
Yeah. It was just, throw it over there. It doesn't matter. You wouldn't even, at least I wouldn't allow myself to question or think that it was wrong in any way, because I assumed that it's what God wanted, and that I might be punished somehow if I disapproved or disagreed in any way. So it was just, okay, I'll keep sweet and do what I'm told.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's sad to see, like, in those situations where if there really was the reason of it being a sacred color, at least then, even at a young age, you can try to, even if it doesn't make sense, you can try to force yourself to make sense. You can have that cognitive dissonance, I think is what they call it, where you can try to say, oh, at least there's a reason, right? And then at least your mind can try to make sense of it. So the fact that they weren't even giving you, like, at least that.
Something to go off of.
Something to try to hold on to, ultimately is going to hurt the church just as much as what it's going to help them, because getting nothing is way, I feel like, worse than getting at least something that you can try to make your mind come to terms with.
Yeah.
You kind of create your own story just to help yourself reason or process it, or even just try to have some grasping understanding of why. I mean, every child's going to ask why, and not every child, I believe, like growing up, it was children don't ask why. And I'm finding out, later on in life, that why is what establishes your growth, your understanding. It expands your brain to having knowledge, to be able to reason within yourself, to know where that goes, rather than just say, put it on a shelf.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's so much suppression, so much stuff you get to dig out later in life that nobody should have to dig that crap up later. It's just not even so overbearing, and it's sad to hear and feel and see, and even know that to even understand that I know what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
To have my own stuff that I get to process and relive again and try to make sense, or at least let it go.
Right.
It's a lot.
So many things get piling up, and so, like you said, the most frustrating thing is that there wasn't really a good reason for so many of these things. It could have been as simple as Warren, for example, in some cases, just saw someone wearing red and thought, that doesn't look right. You know what? New rule: no one gets to wear red. Something as simple as that, and make it sound like it's coming from God, and that it's something,
a decision on a whim.
Exactly.
Just feeling it today. This is the commandment. Everybody say A.
Yeah, exactly. And
no votes. My vote supersedes everyone else's.
Exactly, 100%. He's like, all right, we're going to put this to a vote, but I'm the only one that can vote. Thank you very much. Please leave. That was kind of the way it was. But it affected us forever, right? I mean, today, even to this day, and probably even more so for you, if I'm going to reach out for my red shirt, I can't put a red shirt on without thinking I am not supposed to be wearing this. And then I'm like, wait, get out of that mindset. I'm good, right?
Well, it's a little ironic because that's my favorite color. See my curtain right there?
That's awesome.
Good for you.
No, red essentially is my favorite color. And it's not out of... I've had to work through that process of how it feels comfortable with me, because throughout a majority of my lifetime or upbringing, that belief system was being built and based off of these unnatural understandings of like, these don't make sense and why. If a child was given the reason, the Lord is going to come at this certain, later on, and he's going to show up in a red cape.
Right.
I think a child could probably at least process some of that rather than just be like, don't worry about it. But I've kind of evolved around that mindset and that belief system of it's not a negative thing. It's just a color. It's just a color. And it's okay. And I give myself permission to like that color if I choose to like that color.
Yeah.
And it's actually been a very empowering color because it has a lot of empowering meaning behind it, of knowing, not out of spite, how people could take it I just embrace it and just say, I choose to like red because I like red. It's not just because someone told me I shouldn't or can't or won't. I like the color red. I never was allowed to like it.
Right.
Even there was a point in time where I saw some families were allowing the children to color with crayons. The color red were thrown away. They were taken out of the rainbow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's how extreme they got. And I'm like, that is the most insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Like, you just stand there with your jaw to the floor going, I don't even know what to do with that. I don't even know why that's even a thing.
Yeah. There's so many things. Sam and I, a lot of times through our spiritual journey, even together outside of the FLDS, but even just together, the two of us, we've just come to terms of so many things are just choices. We're like, certain things don't hold morality. Not every single thing holds morality to it. It can just be a choice.
Right.
Some beverages are just beverages, or some colors, in this case, a color can just be a color that you're choosing from. It can just be a choice. It doesn't have to hold this moral good or bad. A color on its own cannot be good or bad. It's just
like,
a color.
It's not going to decide if I go to heaven or not.
Exactly.
Or if that's what I choose to believe. Mm-hmm. It's not going to decipher my afterlife if I choose the color red. How insane is that?
Yeah. Well,
it's ridiculous.
Something that I would like to point out as well is the colors, the crayons, the red crayons that you talked about that were thrown away. Mm-hmm. This type of thing happens well beyond the FLDS belief. But it seems that a rule comes out. The prophet, for example, says, okay, this is the way it is to be now. We don't wear the color red. And then there's this thing that I like to call a spiritual competition amongst the members of the church.
Oh, yes.
Am I right? Where everyone is trying to prove to everyone else that they're the most righteous. To the extreme. So I think the crayons, I don't think that was a direction from the leaders of the church. I think that was a family trying to be better than everyone else. There was this competition of spirituality going on, and they threw away things here. Things weren't allowed there. And also,
everyone's interpretation.
Exactly.
There were things that were said on the pulpit, and you would have 3,500 men that heard the same thing being told to teach and train their children and their families and their wives, and they would all hear something different. I mean, you take that into account of how many versions and how many extreme versions that went and where it grew from. Like, it's just a ripple effect that is just astronomical.
And that's where you go really from religions turning into like more cultural things. That happens so much within the LDS, within the mainstream LDS. People will say, oh, it's so different in Utah. And you do have that culture war, not war, but like that culture competition between each other, you know, where people who are LDS outside of Utah will be like, y'all are crazy over there. Like, why aren't you drinking a Coke? And it says nowhere in the word of wisdom that you can't have a Coke. And here they're like, well, the only thing that makes sense is that this means caffeine. And then we're going to make sure that our family doesn't drink caffeine so that we're more righteous than those who are just not drinking the alcohol and the tea. You know, it ends up becoming, you end up with so much church culture that spreads into the lives of everybody. And then it does feel like it turns its way into doctrine, like with an unspoken. But then later you can always denounce that, right? Like, well, that wasn't actually what we said.
Right.
You know, even though the culture is very real in small communities or within smaller religions, the culture is almost as important as the doctrine at some points.
So, Elise, you've mentioned several different times now, when you were in first grade, this happened, about first grade, this happened. So when you say first grade, what was school like for you in northern Utah?
I loved school. I mean, I loved to learn. I loved my peers. It was exciting to me. I loved to learn all the things that teachers were teaching. I don't know. I was a child being invested.
Did you guys get to go to public school in northern Utah? Because like in Short Creek, Sam had to be homeschooled. They had shut down the schools by the time he was going to school age.
Yeah, sorry. So the school was the Jeff's Academy, called Alta Academy. So it was on the compound of Rulon Jeff's home, where his family was raised for a while, and then they built another home was built on the same property for him and his family. So that big schoolhouse was essentially the meeting house. It was the labor and delivery. It was the school. It had a lot of... It was their cellar. It had a baptismal font in the basement. There was a lot in that building. So a lot of memories.
How many children went to school there?
Oh, gosh. I don't even know. Several hundred.
Was it like a very big community? Like up there, I mean, when I think of Short Creek, we know that like at the most there was about 10,000 members, and a lot of them were in Short Creek at the same time. How many members do you think there were in northern Utah when you were being raised in?
There must have been a couple of thousand, probably.
Oh, okay. I mean, so it's pretty large then.
A few thousand. I mean, essentially, you know, families all, you know, counted for, all the heads. But as far as the student body, you know, there was quite a few hundred. You know, there was first grade to 12th grade. So they had enough students to fill, like a normal sized classroom was 8 students up to, I don't know, in the teens, probably 15 students per class. Wow, okay. I remember, so I have actually I don't know, I'm just going to pull it up, but I have this.
Oh, my word.
Look at that. So what was that? What is that?
So this is the yearbook.
Oh, my word.
The last year that I went to school, and I'll show you a picture really quick. Flipped, but here was my class.
No way.
And I'm right here. See me being a rebel? Have with my sleeves up.
Sleeves rolled up.
They didn't tell me to push them down. I remember my underwear was in the way, and so I had my sleeves up because I was trying to fix it. Wow. And nobody told me to fix it.
Makes you look like a rebel from way back then.
Anyway, yeah.
But those dresses are a lot different than what you typically think of in Short Creek.
Like, was how I dressed when I was growing up.
Yeah, that's like Easter dresses.
They were homemade. All the dresses were homemade. Everything was hand sewn. Yeah. Just like, I'm sure Sam remembers all of the sewing projects
I used to wear shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to wear shirts and sometimes pants that my mother or one of my sisters would make.
I never did get to put those pants on my boys later on when they had the jeans that they made. Those were very nicely made, but I did never get those. But growing up, my mom bought the shirts and pants for the boys. And but they were modest, you know, they had to have certain colors, patterns.
Was the hair as serious? Like having it in a specific braid? Was the poof a thing up there, or was that a cultural thing to the creek?
The poof didn't happen until we moved to the creek, and that was like
Oh,
probably the later 90s, early 2000s, when that started becoming a more common, normal thing.
One of those Jeff's wives started it, and everyone in the community wanted to follow suit. It sounds like, and tried
I
to.
imagine that's where it came from, because at the Alta Academy there was a home ec class, and that was very strictly like hands-on learning, all the things like learning how to tat, learning how to sew, learning how to change a light bulb, learning how to change a tire, learning how to slaughter a cow, learning how to those things were more
Interesting.
privately done away from the on another corner of the lot, or the area, the grounds of the school, away from the kids that would have been traumatized. They were careful. They had, I don't know if you remember D. Jessup. He would
Yes.
come
Oh,
up
yes, I
there
do.
and teach like survival skills to people, and learn how
Uh huh.
they dressed a lot of animals. They, had hands-on learning how to take care of our own meat, how to process it and what to do with it, and how to do it in a priesthood way, like how to handle the
Oh my gosh.
animal, and how I believe, there's humane ways of doing it, and I appreciate that, but it was
hmm
it was handled in a
that's
priesthood
that sounds like a
Always
lot.
with the priesthood
context.
stuff. It needs to be done exactly. Isn't that so interesting? They tried to involve the priesthood in every aspect of
Yeah.
everything that we
Yeah.
did. Yeah. So D. Jessup, just you brought
Mhm.
him up. He's the one that was also in charge of the zoo in
Yeah.
Short Creek. Is that
Actually,
right?
yes.
Yes, the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My grandma,
Okay.
I mean, it's a little off topic, but because I'm remembering, I think it's a unique part of my story, is that my grandma was known as the bird lady. Her name was Lou Jean Dockstader. She actually was a
Okay.
heavy smoker, believe it or not. So
Interesting. And how did the church feel about
she
that?
just got away with it. Don't ask me how.
Wow. That must have been before Warren was in
Oh,
charge.
yes. She actually did quit smoking before she passed away, but she
Okay.
smoked, I think, 45 years of her life. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, so this little tidbit. So she was a bird lover. I grew up with her having always a parrot, and he was kind of mean. He wasn't very nice, and it was just always something I connect with my grandma, and she loved him, and his name was Paco. And actually, believe now that I'm thinking about this, he came from Warren.
Really? How did that work? No wonder he was mean.
And now I'm thinking about this. Holy cow! How did these angles tie into my family?
Oh man.
She took him in, and yeah, and loved him. And
Wow.
anyway, so she just had a fondness for birds and animals in general. And when we moved down here to the Colorado City Hilldale community, the zoo was being established and it was being put together. The bishop, Uncle Fred, had a big motion to have some community entertainment and something that the community could enjoy. And so he told Dee to, help him with this. I don't know the whole story. I'm just interpreting this part. He was the head leader of organizing it because he was the one handling the animals, taking care of them. And my grandma was in charge of the birdhouse. So if you remember,
Oh,
they
really?
had
Oh,
that
yes.
established cages with all the birds. And growing up, we
Uh-huh.
would go and help my grandma go feed the birds. We would clean the cages, feed the birds, clean the dishes, engage with them. And anyway, so she's a part of the community where
Wow.
until the zoo was taken apart, it was almost broke her heart to have to let go of those animals, because that was
Oh, Ben.
something that she absolutely put her heart and soul into, and she absolutely loved them, and it was
Wow.
taken away. But anyway, so that's part of the community of a little history of my
Wow.
grandma.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed and loved to visit
Yeah.
the bird cages, and other parts of the zoo as well, but I very much remember going and trying to talk to the parrots.
And a lot of them would
And,
talk, and she
you
taught
know,
them how. And there was a lot of them that she
oh,
engaged
really?
with, and I remember a lot of their names, and like, I don't know. It's quite an endearing, soft-hearted memory of something that
Yeah.
my kids will never experience. But
Yeah, exactly. And that's unfortunate. It would be very amazing if at some point Short Creek could bring back
it would
something
be a
like that.
different world for sure. But those people aren't here
Right,
that had
right.
their investment, or at least their intentions, or like they're invested.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
So in your school at Alta Academy, I just a side note here, when it comes to Alta Academy, it was one of those things that me as a young boy going to homeschool, we looked at the people that attended Alta Academy as these, I don't know, superior beings, because you attended the Jeff's
Yep.
school and you got such a better
You would
education
think.
and all of these things because right. Well, and you were promised as a student going to Alta Academy, if I'm not mistaken, that you were getting a superior
Oh, the
type of
Jeff's
education.
mentality. Just put it out there. Just tell you that
Exactly.
if you were around that group, then you had a little bit of hierarchy. I don't know. You had the involvement of like,
Yep.
I remember moving down, and people would ask, well, where did you go to school? And I'd say, and it just was normal for me. And they would just be like, oh, like, oh.
Teach me your ways.
I'm like, it's just the
Yeah,
school,
exactly.
we're normal kids. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, but just so you know, and it sounds like you did experience that from other people. From us not attending Alta Academy, we definitely looked at it as, oh, I wouldn't even qualify for such an amazing
I didn't
school.
realize
And now
how people felt about it that way.
Yeah.
To me, it was completely
Yeah.
normal. I didn't feel superior. I didn't feel above anybody else. Looking back now, I can see how that was leading up to a point of like when you get into junior high school time, when they really drill it in your brain of where you are going and what you're going to be doing and how you're going to live and who you're going to become. As a child, you're just learning all the bases so that when you get there, then they can start drilling you in. So I didn't really get to
Right.
experience the level of, put you on this pedestal or like you were someone special. I realize now
Okay.
thinking, I really did have it good, actually.
Were there kids in the community in northern Utah that didn't go to Alta Academy? Or was it, if you're in the community in northern Utah, you automatically just went there? Or was there like a separation of, I don't want to say classes, but was there like a separation of groups of people within the community in northern Utah?
Not that I recall. A lot of people that sent their kids to school, they went to church there. So there was a lot of involvement. Okay. I don't know of anybody that went to a public school while other siblings went to Alta Academy. I personally don't know of any.
Okay. So in school, in the Alta Academy, obviously within the FLDS church from the moment I was born, and it sounds like probably since the moment you were born, it was all about keeping the boys and girls separate. We weren't allowed to date, weren't allowed to look at the opposite sex. It was very much, everything was arranged as far as marriage goes. What was it like in the school dynamic? Were they separating the boys and girls in the classes, or how did that work?
In the younger grades, they just had them co-ed. They were boy and girls. In the later years, and looking back at like remembering like how the classes were, like there were specific boy classes that had, like they learned certain skills that were mainly about men or things that they would typically do. But those were older grades. The younger grades, like even in junior high, I remember by the time I got to 5th grade, they started segregating a lot more. And I realized now, looking back, that that's kind of when things started shifting, when they had another building that was built across the, did you ever go experience that up there? Did you ever go to that the parking lot or see the building at all?
I never did.
Okay.
The whole group, the Northern Utah group of FLDS people I was never in any way connected to that at all. It was always in Short Creek and Hilldale.
Interesting. I do remember seeing new people But those people came from the creek, and they were high schoolers. It was like they were there for their senior year, or because they needed like another family, or an aunt or an uncle was helping that teenager who needed a little extra TLC and needed to get out of the community, was being difficult. Or the scenario was that they just wanted to go to the Alta Academy school. They wanted to experience that, and they had had to get special permission to be enrolled and be a part of the school itself. And there was quite a few that did that. Some of them didn't last very long. Some of them graduated.
And did they have, like, did you get a normal high school diploma? Like, were they registered with the state?
I don't know.
Was it purely just I just wasn't sure if people left there with a high school diploma and like could go and get higher education, or if they'd still have to go get a GED.
There was a whole ceremony. And so I would imagine that it was like a homeschool, like it probably was a legal, at least legible document that claims, like today, you can have a homeschool diploma, but it will only qualify for so much. A lot of rules and stuff have changed, but I don't know if they had to like register through the state, if they had to go like take an extra test with the state to say, I did indeed learn all of these things, and I have officially learned up to 12th grade, and then get an official document, kind of like a marriage license of saying now we're legally married.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I only went to 5th grade, 1st through 5th grade up there. So.
Okay. While you were there, was Warren Jeffs already the principal of the school?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What was he like?
As a kid, he was just, I didn't know him any different other than just being a guy. I'll take that back. Our family had a lot to do with the Jeffs family, but in school, he was just a figure of authority because he was the principal. You listen to authority. And so putting him in that generic space, or like identifying who he is, of where they stand, you didn't challenge him. You listened and you followed and you learned and you did. So to me, he wasn't necessarily intimidating. I do remember liking him at one point because there wasn't anything negative for me to believe that he was a bad person or something that I should feel differently about him. He was just an authoritative figure.
I see.
Did that make it easier when he ended up becoming prophet? Was it easier to go into that space? Okay. No. I wasn't sure if it was like I'm happy he's prophet. I liked him as a principal, or was
I had my eyebrows raised. I had my questions. I was really shocked.
Good.
I did not like when that happened, but put it on the shelf.
Right. Yeah. A lot of us didn't have enough knowledge to not like it or to like it. We were so much
indoctrinated,
kept in the dark. Yes. So when our parents said, this is what we're doing, then we said, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing as well. And so we just kind of followed suit. I was going to ask, we hear from, and a lot of our viewers will probably want to know this, we hear from a lot of other young girls that were going to Alta Academy that they felt, now looking back, they felt that in a way Warren Jeffs was grooming them at a very young age. Did you see that or feel that at all now looking back?
Oh, yeah. And I would say just because of my experience that I had with him, and I was going to get to that, he made a prime example of me publicly.
Oh, wow.
So we actually only lived like 5 minutes away from the Roland Jeffs home there from the school in Little Cottonwood Canyon. After my second mom was married, a few months later or a year, I don't know what the whole timeline is, but it wasn't very long, my dad started looking for a home because we needed, both moms were really tired of taking turns sleeping on the couch every other night. So
oh, no.
They had a dad room, a girl's bedroom, and a boy's bedroom. And the moms shared every other night that bedroom.
Interesting. I've never heard that.
That would make
We
it
only-
so much worse. Like, you already know that your husband's sleeping with another woman, but like, if you get booted to the couch,
What do
when
you
he
do?
is,
I've
What
never
do you
heard that.
do?
Oh my gosh.
Should have thought about
Wow,
that
I
before they
can't
placed her in
imagine.
our family to see if we even had room.
Oh my goodness.
So we got a really nice home, and that would be a dream home for me raising my kids. Absolutely beautiful. Loved that home. Totally gated in, beautiful yard, beautiful home. It was just it was a magical place to grow up, honestly. Anyway, so we lived
Wow.
5 minutes away from a drive from the school. And my second mom ended up being a teacher there. She was an aide, I believe, before she got married or just before she got married. And so she was already established or involved in the school. And then, so after she came into our family, then she did a little bit more teaching aid, and then she became a teacher later. So we had 10 students in the class. There was 3 boys and 7 girls. And so in that year, it's kind of where they started transitioning the students into a lot more classes. So the 5th grade was a 1 class all day setting. Learned everything. So all your subjects and everything, you had 1 teacher all day. And they were starting to include like home ec classes. Like they had a cooking class and a little sewing class, and they would bring in people on how to teach everybody how to like tie a tie, like on yourself and someone else, and just learn all of these skills that we would need to know. The teacher was instructed by Warren to get our class and put on a play. She and her sisters, or her family, I later found out that they actually wrote the play. And my part in this play was a character of a very rich person, a woman. And to play the part, I would need my costume to show that I was very rich. And so our class worked really hard at learning the whole play, like parts. I had a main part in it. And so I took it seriously. It was very intimidating. Warren wanted, putting the pieces together, I believe he wanted to just have the drama class of the high schoolers to experience kind of like going out and seeing an opera or a performance, or, like having just a little bit of camaraderie between all the students to kind of like get a little bit more comfortable with it and understand like what it's like to be in character, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, just experience.
Yeah.
So we worked really hard at this, and we were getting to the point where we were going to start putting our costumes together. And up in the upstairs, the main part of the building of the high school, so you had to go up another flight of stairs, there was a room where they kept all of the drama classes' costumes and all of their paraphernalia. And we were given permission to go up there and find what we needed to play our roles. And a piece and part to this story is for people to understand jewelry was not accepted. It wasn't permitted. And, again, people having their own interpretation on vainness or worldly things. We don't adorn our bodies. We don't bring attention to ourselves. We're very plain.
Right.
We're very clean.
Yep. That's how I remember it.
And I wasn't allowed as a girl. Like, I didn't have bracelets. I didn't get rings. I didn't get playthings. I didn't get necklaces. Definitely no earrings. Absolutely not. And my part in this play, I was told that I had to have all of it. And they had this jewelry box that had all this jewelry. And they had these clip-on earrings, which the high schoolers played their parts and they wore all those kinds of things. It's funny because that was accepted. That was justified because, you're playing a fictional part. It wasn't real
Right.
life, which is kind of odd to say because we weren't allowed to watch things, but we could sure act like it, you know, when it was permitted.
Yeah.
I did not, in my gut, in my heart, I was absolutely petrified thinking of the idea of having to wear this jewelry because I was never allowed to. The most jewelry that you could even think of was a watch. Like, not even play rings, no bracelets, no necklaces. You just didn't have those things. So now all of a sudden it's okay, and now I should feel comfortable putting these things on that I'm not even allowed to even have in my possession, let alone allowed to feel okay within and on myself. I didn't feel comfortable, and I was petrified of standing in front of people and feeling like I was already being judged and not even had worn it in front of anybody yet. So wearing these things in front of people publicly, like having all eyes on me, absolutely petrified me. Like, I did not like to ever be in the center of attention. And just the idea of having a main role in this play was already pressuring, was already enough, was just so overwhelming. So I was trying to find a way to convince myself, like, I'm being asked to do this. There's no way I can say no. I don't have a choice in saying I don't want this part. It's already decided. Everybody's already learning their lines. There's just no going back. So I'm just going to have to figure out a way to make this work. While we were choosing all of this and all the students were finding their costumes, the thought came to me, just take them home, try them on for a while, get comfortable with it, and bring them back. Nobody will know. So I did. I snuck them home. And it was at the end of the day, so everybody was rushing. There was a lot of activity going on, so nobody really noticed because there was a lot going on. The hallways were getting vacuumed. The students were closing up the classrooms. Everyone's cleaning up for the day. So there was a lot of commotion going on. So there wasn't really any eyes on me, and I was able to pull that off. And in my mind, I was thinking, this isn't wrong because I'm going to have to wear them anyway. These are ones that I'm going to have to use, so I'll bring them back. Well, that weekend, the next day, would have been a Saturday because we had Monday through Friday, we had school. So on Saturday, I was outside and I went into my backpack and got this jewelry and went behind some bushes and trees and put them on because I didn't want to put them on in the house and have my mom see me or any of my siblings. And I kind of lost track of time, knowing where I was, what I was doing, and my mom found me and she saw me. The pit in my stomach. My mom was shocked. I don't really know what her how she truly felt. Like, did she feel like completely disgusted with me? Was she just disappointed? Was she angry? She was shocked, obviously, because we didn't have that stuff at home, so I must have gotten it from somewhere. And I told her where I got it, and she's like, why did you take it? And why are you wearing it? And I tried telling her, we're doing this play, and I showed her the script and had my whole lines listed out, my copies of the paper that had all of our lines highlighted and everything, and she was not buying it. And so she told my dad, and he was I guess a part of the story is kind of detrimental to so I'm going to back up just a little bit. So my dad was part owner in a company. I don't know if you remember hearing the name Hydra Pack.
It sounds familiar. Yes, that was in northern Utah.
So it was in Salt Lake. Yes,
the company.
And they worked with Thiokol, and they manufactured the O-rings for NASA.
Oh yes.
And so my dad and two of Warren's brothers, Brian Jeffs and Wallace Jeffs, and my dad all had a 3-part ownership in this company. And it was like a contract that was only for so many years. And they had employees there that worked at this building, and they had high cleanliness room. Like they had to wear all their gear, like all of their garb on, and they had these little magnifying glasses, and they would stitch together the spliced, like by the tiniest little tiny micro slice, and assemble these O-rings. And then they would have them shipped and inspected through several different degrees of inspecting, and they had to keep them very, very clean and very sanitary. And then they would ship them off to NASA, and they would put them on their space rockets. Well, so a piece to this is it's another little part of history. You remember the Challenger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh yes. Sorry,
so,
I thought you were. Yes.
In '86, when that happened, my dad was in the serious hot seat, and because they were wanting to blame the O-rings for being defective, excuse me.
Oh, interesting.
And
they wanted to blame him for the explosion.
Well, their company, yeah, and he was the spokesperson for the company, and he was under some serious pressure. I don't remember a lot of conversations, like words, like remembering what they were saying. I just remember the seriousness in the home. Like us kids were not allowed to be extra silly, loud. We weren't allowed to go out and play very much. Like it was like, you sit down, you be quiet. There's a lot of stress in this house. I remember as a kid that was like 4.5, 5 years old, whatever it was. So that's part of.
Wow.
So my dad was working at Hydro Pack, and it was across the valley. So when my mom found out, he had a lot of very important meetings. He was a very important person talking with very important people. And so he would travel and fly all over the United States for meetings and all kinds of things for business. So his time was very valuable. And so when my mom found me with this jewelry and telling me that she's going to have to tell my dad, I was just like, no, this is not going to go well. So she tells him, and then I don't remember what the punishment was over the weekend, but I had some kind of punishment that I had to go without dinner or something like that. That was kind of a common thing as a punishment, that, go to your room. Chores were not something that I necessarily had to do. It was mostly just go to your room. And a lot of times the punishment was go without a meal. Anyway, I didn't feel like eating anyway because my stomach was absolutely in knots. And I was so stressed and overwhelmed, and I was just worried about what was going to happen with all of this. And my dad came home. They talked. My mom and dad talked. Then my mom told me that on Monday, I would have to meet with the principal, Warren, and my dad would come. And I was given some explanation and a little bit of shaming and guilt of how much pressure my dad was under at the time. This wasn't at the time of the Challenger, of course. I'm just saying, like, his job, there was a lot going on that he was very busy with. And so for him to have to take time off just for me was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just to put into perspective here, your dad had this really important job that he was doing and very busy. But even, I would say, for most people in the FLDS, and not to mention the fact that you had to meet Warren Jeffs, the principal, about this, but most people, children, were terrified to have to be called to talk to your father.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
It was just something we were afraid of.
Your parents were called in
almost every home.
That was a big deal. And I was one of those kids that I wasn't a problem kid. I had never had to be sent to the principal's office. Like 1st through 5th grade, this is the first time that I've had to be put in that hot seat. I hated to be the center of it. I hated to be corrected. I mean, it just was hard for me that, and I knew that essentially on some level looking back now, when I made the decision to even take the jewelry, I knew it was wrong, but in my mind, to convince myself, just trying to still do what I was being asked to do and have it be okay, that was enough to convince me to do it. I mean, I'm not saying that taking things is right. It wasn't okay, but there was a lot of pressure on me to have to figure out how to feel comfortable with this, because I'm judged and being told, no, you can't have it or use it, or it's not going to be in your life. But now it's okay. And now all of a sudden I'm supposed to be comfortable with this. Like I'm being told, like, you're a bad person for wearing these because, you know, that's just not who we are. But now it's okay.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and you have to remember, just put into perspective too, 5th grade is what, 10
12.
years old?
I was 12.
Oh, you were 12. Okay. Yeah, that's still just so young too. That the idea of, oh, I'm going to take this and I'm going to bring it back. I feel like at 12 years old,
I didn't want it. I didn't want anything to do with it, honestly. But I felt like I was being forced.
But 12 is still just so young.
Yes, very young.
Yeah, and 12 years old is just so young to be asked of something that's going to make you so uncomfortable. Like you said, the older kids, by the time you're 16, 17 in high school, you have a different level of what's okay and what's not, and it's okay to just
and maturity.
Act, so to even have that be asked, but at 12, you're just so young to be put in a situation like that.
Yeah, it's so hard to imagine from someone that's never been a part of the FLDS to understand why it was such a big deal for you. But that just goes to show how drilled into our brains your appearance, the importance of your appearance was. And it was just one of those things that you, not only would you have to wear these things that you thought were wicked and that you felt uncomfortable with, but you would have to do that in front of who knows how many people as well that you know would be looking at you thinking, oh, look how wicked she looks because she's wearing these awful things that we're not allowed to do. So it's hard to understand, but I know where you're coming from. I understand why it was such a big deal.
Very unsafe and feeling very out of control. Not feeling supported, not being heard, not being understood, not even given a line of at least compassion or empathy to say to the parent or to the principal anyways, you know, even to that level of saying, you're requiring, the prophet too, you're requiring everyone to do these things, but then justifying, it's like such a hypocrite way of going about it. And expecting children to trust at the same time. The level of justification, it just baffles my mind looking back and thinking about all of the experiences and little things that happen. And it's going, how is that even okay? I mean, it's okay today, but it's not tomorrow. How does that compute? How does that reason? How do you live that way and feel authentic and feel okay about feeling safe in that? I don't. I never did.
Yeah. How did that meeting go with Warren and your father?